Good afternoon / evening, wherever you are in Australia. We're covering Queensland, Northern Territory and WA time zones right now. It's a good thing they put them all together because I don't know how I'd cope once it goes to daylight saving. My name's Dante. I'll be taking you through tonight's presentation of a sales strategy for the self-employed. It's a bit of a guide for freelancers, for contractors and for sole traders as well. This is a live session, so please feel free to put your questions in the Zoom webinar chat and I'll be able to answer those along the way. And also the Q&A is open, so if you've got any burning questions you'd like to have answered and more specifically, please put them in there. And a bit of housekeeping too. This is a webinar, not a regular Zoom call. So if you're used to regular Zoom calls where you can sort of, jump on in and ask questions or you can see who else is on the call, this one's not presented like that. It's presented as a webinar. So you won't be able to see each other, but you can see me. Right, we're brought tonight by, oops, I just had my screen go a bit strange, brought by Business Station, the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program right across Australia. Business Station presenting this in WA as our partner with Regional Development Australia, Brisbane in Queensland, and Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory where I am. A bit of a quote here from Brian Tracy, who's written over 70 books on motivational self-development and sales training. Keep your sales pipeline full by prospecting continuously. Always have more people to see than you have time to see them. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Having so many clients and customers lined up ready to see you that you can't actually get to them all. Trust me, it's something which does hit quite frequently in my world. And when it did first hit the first time, it felt very, very strange, but I got very, very used to it very, very quickly. Today, we're going to look at what a sales strategy is. We're looking at targeting a specific kind of customer, sales and self-serve, and what the difference is between the two and where you may need to jump from one to the other. We'll look at what the clear differentiated sales tasks are, and that will depend very much on the kind of approach you take to sales. We'll cover that too, along with how you can be a consultant or an advisor to your customers, not just a doer of work. We'll look at the ability for you to go up market, which is a strategy all of its own, which allows you to move from being the cheapest in town to being not the cheapest in town. We'll look at experimenting with what works when you want to add new products and new services, and also what the concept is of channel partnership. These all sound like really big words. I promise I'm not going to get all super sales talk or marketing speak on you. It's going to be very plain English. And if there's anything at all you do not understand, please pop it in the Q&A or the Zoom webinar chat, and I'll be able to clarify what those meanings are. And don't worry, I'm not going to necessarily identify who it was who asked that, but if you don't understand anything, you won't learn. So I really want to make it easy for you to learn today. My background is as a certified practicing marketer with the Australian Marketing Institute. I work with Lean Startup Labs as well by providing some content through to them on startup, helping businesses getting started up. I'm the head of digital and a business development manager with Treaty Business Consulting in Darwin. I lead training with Facebook Australia and New Zealand, and I have previously run an agency called Clickstarter that I still do a lot of work with. And I'm part of Google's Digital Springboard program, which is bringing digital literacy training right around Australia through webinars and live workshops as well. Can't believe we're actually back to that in the Northern Territory and many parts of Australia too, where we're actually doing live workshops again. It's a lot of fun, and I do miss actually being in there. Good question coming up. Is there a recording going to be available of this? Absolutely yes. In a couple of days' time, you'll see this pop up on the Business Station YouTube channel. So just go to youtube.com and then type in Business Station, and there's a whole bunch of them. In fact, all the C19 Biz Booster webinars I've been doing for the last 3 months are in there. So there's a ton of them. Please pop on in, have a look at those. There's a whole wealth of stuff you can do. You can fill up a weekend just listening to my dulcet tones. That's a nice way of describing it. So we're going to start off tonight with what a sales strategy actually is and why you would even need one at all. Well, why? Because regardless of what you do, you need a pipeline of work coming through. Doesn't matter whether you're a contractor, sole trader, a freelancer, you need more work coming to you, because if you're not in a full-time job, if you're not in something where you're assured of your income every week / fortnight / month, then you need to be planning for what's coming next down the pipe. What is it? Well, put simply, your sales strategy is how you're going to develop and then drive revenue, which is what you run your business on and pay yourself with. So they are very much interrelated. You need the pipeline to pay yourself, but you need a strategy to get stuff in the pipeline to pay yourself. We'll look more into that. I'm going to let you know of a little story about it. If you're not from Darwin, you may not know about this. The Impex story is a story of a $40 billion natural gas project. A massive natural gas plant was built here in the Darwin region, which was to handle the processing of natural gas and sending it off to Japan after it's been gathered from the Timor Sea. Now, the Impex project generated millions and millions and millions of extra dollars into the economy over a period of about 6 years. What they did was it sucked up all the Sparkies in town, all the Chippies in town, everybody who was working in any kind of administration and HR related field was sucked into this project. And then it started sucking people from all around Australia because they needed, up to 8,000 extra people to be working on this project during its construction. Of course, though, once the construction ended, so did the gravy train. And what we found was that all these people who had left their contracts, they did lots of little contracts, went into this one great big full-time contract with Impex. They were reliant for up to 6 years on this one source of income. The good times had to come to an end. And when that ended, they had no backup plan. They had no way to go any further than that. So what is your plan if you're relying on one source of revenue to secure more work after that one particular contract comes to an end? That's the question which a lot of people didn't ask at the end of that particular project. We've seen the same happen in Mackay at the Curtis Island gas plant, is it gas or coal? I think it's coal processing plant. And very much the same in anywhere where there's been iron ore shipped out. So places like Port Hedland, Karratha in Western Australia, where we've seen massive economic crashes happen because there was so much reliance upon one project and one contract. And a lot of people who would normally be a bit smarter and go, oh, I'm going to work in various things to keep myself with a great pipeline coming through, have not allowed that to happen. So the sales pipeline is basically at the start of a great big line of work coming through as a great big pump. And that pump can be more than one pump. It could be several pumps. It could be coming from several sources. That pipeline that comes to you may come from various different places. This is, of course, all metaphorically. There's not an actual pump coming into your house. What it is the ability for you to have work and customers coming into you on a consistent basis so that when one piece of work goes out, another piece of work shuffles on in. The important thing is you always need water in the pipe coming towards you. You always need new work coming in. And if you talk about it like a sales funnel, it's always something coming new into the funnel so it can be nurtured down to becoming a client at the end. Really important to keep that going. Really difficult sometimes to work on the idea that you need to do that while you're working in the actual business or job that you're doing. So how do I build a pipeline? Well, this is the very beginning of a sales strategy for you. The parts of a sales strategy include a target market, an ideal customer profile. Some people might call that a client avatar, your position in the market that you choose to operate at, what we call sales motions, which is the things you go through in order to secure a sale, what your method is on how to communicate with clients to turn them into paying clients. And there's also the sales channels. So all those various different places that are bringing new people in, like the different pumps at the head of the pipeline. You'll also then look at what your target market is first. So first of all, when you're looking at who your target market is and who the person is you want to try and get hold of as a potential customer, you got to look at the reality of the industry you're in. If someone's looking to, if you're selling dental supplies in your market, and you are trying to market yourself to people who are not dental professionals or dentists, then you're probably, you're heading upstream without a paddle. You really, really need to be working within the industry you're in order to get the right kind of material in front of the right kind of people. You also look at your target market as where is the money right now? Is there money in that market and where is it? Now, sometimes if you've ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? It's a really good example in a metaphorical sense of, the money was once here, now it's moved to somewhere else and I don't know where it is. So it's up to you as you're forming who your target market is to figure out what the industry is you're trying to appeal to, and then where the money actually lies at the moment, because not every segment of every industry is the money section at the moment. Right now, you'd be kind of having a lot of trouble trying to sell to tourism when tourism is crashing all around Australia. but selling to IT, selling to government agencies probably would be great because there's a lot of money being thrown into those areas right now. And then another way of selecting your target market, if you want to try and future-proof yourself a little bit, is to try and take some estimations on where the money is going. When you know a major infrastructure project is coming to your city in the next 5 years, you know that there's possibly some areas of work that you can kind of leverage off in those areas within your industry and related often to where the money is now, to see where the money is you're going to get in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. Now, whilst it might be great to try and get that one unicorn of a project that's going to get all of your stuff coming in, I was warned by a very, very, very successful sales professional once upon a time that, you know, relying upon one source of income for over 80% of your income is really a danger zone, because when you lose that one or it becomes shaky, you're losing 80% of your income. And then you have to then go and build a new pipeline, or to try and find out where that money might have gone, where the cheese moved to in the maze. So that's just looking at your target market. If you want to look at who your ideal customer is, that's a whole webinar all of its own. But in the very, very three basics there, it's a matter of who needs what you do or sell, who you like working with, because you get a choice in that too, and who amongst all those people brings you the most profit. Some of the times the people that you like to work with the most are highly unprofitable. That's my case. I love working with small businesses and with startups, but quite often they're the ones that have the least amount of money and bring me the least amount of profit. But they also would be the ones who need me the most when they're looking for someone to help them out with their startup. So there's a fine balance you have to bring of the ideal customer being someone who needs you, who you like working with, and who is also profitable. Anything outside of that, then you're starting to get a little bit into charity work, and that's not really what a business is all about. Then we look at your market positioning. We're looking at your unique selling proposition. This is the one where, let's just say you are a graphic designer. I'm going to take you as a graphic designer, line you up in a board against 10 other graphic designers. You all sell the same product. You all do the same thing. Your pricing may be similar, but there's something about each of you that's uniquely different. And in most of the cases, a lot of businesses don't bother on their unique selling proposition. They don't actually go and work out what it is that is different about them compared to everybody else. So when you can see what your secret sauce is, what your superpower is that the others don't have, that helps you to position yourself in the market as, I do this, but my special secret superpower is this. Then you work out what your brand's message is. So your brand's message isn't something like open 7 days with great customer service. That's expected. Great customer service and open 7 days in a lot of businesses is just par for the course. It's what everybody should be doing in that particular area. Yours could be, I do quality graphic design for boutique customers. Sorry, that's not enough of a brand message. Your brand message for a graphic designer in that case would be more likely be something like, let's just say, we create graphics for customers who have trouble telling their story. Something like that. Your brand's message has to appeal to what your customer needs, not what you do. Market positioning includes, knowing who your competitors are, doing an analysis of that, working out who they are and what they do and what the points of difference are between you and they. Your sales motions are those little steps you take to get your customer onboarded. So once you've got in touch with them, this is what they have to go through to get to be your customer. So for instance, if it starts off with a Facebook ad, then what's the next step? They see the Facebook ad. Do they get retargeted as with another Facebook ad, which gives them an offer that they can take up? Then what do? Do they click on a link and that puts them into a landing page that perhaps they put in their details such as their name and their email address. And then the next step is that you send them an email reaching out and saying, hey, can I help you in some way? Or let's just download this ebook. Those individual steps are what called your sales motions. They're the motions you have to go through in order to turn someone from someone who doesn't deal with you now into a customer or a client. Then you've also got your sales decks, your proposals, your quotes, your PowerPoint presentations, all that sort of stuff, your rate cards, all those little bits and pieces of what we call collateral or paraphernalia that you're going to put in front of a customer that tells your story, lets them know what you do, gives them the price and enough information for them to make some kind of action on. And then finally, your sales motions includes what your terms of engagement are. So how do they actually become your client? Do they have to go a qualification process? Do you do a discovery call where you work out if you're actually the right person for them or not? Or do you have some other kind of method you go through that allows them to become your client? Your method then is the things that you use, the tools that you use, or the methodology, if you like, on what you use to bring a client into you. So that can include techniques like sales funnels. If you don't know what a sales funnel is, it's basically, well, kind of like what the little picture there is showing, where people come in at the top of the funnel, they get nurtured into becoming prospects that you want to start to call and start to have some kind of contact with, finally becoming a customer who drops out cha-ching at the bottom and becomes a paying customer. Is your method something that's in person, or is it online? Are you somebody who tends to work more with trade shows and expos? Or are you someone who does everything online? You want to keep it that online way, more automated, easier to get back to when you've got the time, if you're doing a side gig, for instance. And your method may include things like providing quotes, providing estimates, sending out samples of what you do. Quite often samples are quite powerful with things like cosmetics, something like textiles, graphic design, that kind of thing, where people can send out examples of what it is they do. Once we've moved on from your method, we move into what your sales channels are. And we're going to look into these a lot more deeply soon, so you get a really good idea of what each of them are. Your sales channels include things like advertising. Do you pay for ads somewhere, whether that's on TV, radio, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google, or wherever you finally put your money in to advertise your goods and services? Do you do it through networking and referrals? As often word of mouth is said to be the most powerful and most persuasive way to get someone to buy from you. So do you go to networking events? Do you go to referral groups like BNI chapters or business expansion networks or places like that? Business professional women networks, for instance, are fantastic places for you to get some kind of referral for new business from people that you may not normally reach with your advertising. Or you're someone who does demonstrations, and demonstrations would be things like undercoverware parties or Tupperware parties, or the people who do, it slices, it dices, it juliennes kind of machines at shopping centers where they give you demonstrations of how things work. You often see them at the Royal Show, things like that. So we're talking about the ways that you get people into your pipeline in the first place. So let's look at attracting a target customer. What does it actually take to attract a target customer as part of your sales strategy? First up, we're going to look at what we call the sales model quadrants, which is deciding upon where you sit in amongst all this. Now, up the very top, you've got the people who are paying a lot of money per contract for you. Down the bottom, they're a low value contract. So they might be a $5 or $10 per sale down the bottom. They could be $3,000 to $5,000 or more in the high value at the top. And as part of these quadrants, go the cross along the horizontal is where everything is done self-serve. So like signing up for MailChimp, for instance. If you ever signed up for Facebook or MailChimp or Facebook ads, it's all self-serve. You go in there and you do it all on your own. Then you go through from self-serve right through to a different paradigm, which is working with complex sales processes where you don't do it self-serve, where you have to go through something a little bit more. It may mean going through a qualification process. It may mean going through a process of meetings or discovery calls, where it's more than just turn up to a website and put in your details. It could mean, turn up to a website, put in your details, then someone gets back to you, then you organize a meeting, then you have to go through a tender process and a qualification process till finally you become a customer of that particular person. So somewhere in amongst all that, you'll sit on the top right, the top left, where it's transactional. This is where doesn't take much to get onto you as a customer, but there's a fairly good value per customer. Now, this could be things like when you're selling a $110 dress on an e-commerce site. You do it all yourself, that you're not having to, the customer's not having to go through a great deal of pain to get that dress. They just fill out a form, put in the credit card details, and the dress comes. It may be an expensive dress, but the process doesn't require you having to take them and do demonstrations, do Zoom calls and show the dress, or to somehow, go through a process of educating them on each textile and its provenance. On the top right, you got the enterprise level. This is where you've got a very expensive product or service that has to go through a more complex process to get to be sold to someone. So this will be some areas. Well, we'll show you some examples of this, like in the next slide, literally. Down the bottom left, you've got the self-service, which is where people are literally buying low value things really quickly. The perfect example of that would be eBay, Amazon, Wish. Wish and Amazon have certainly nailed this right down to the, it doesn't take much for you to buy something with them. You look it up, it could be $2 to buy, another $1 to get it delivered, great. The $3, whack, straight on the credit card, off it goes. I don't really have to think about it, and quite often I usually forget about it because it's very low value per sale. And it's also completely self-serve with very little service involved in it. For $2 of product, I'm not expecting a lot of service. In fact, it'd be ridiculous for me to expect service, because how would they make money if they're constantly talking to people about a $2 product? On the bottom right, it's completely blank. The reason being that anything that's super low value should not have a complex sales process for it. That would be a place where you'd actually be creating a bankrupt business. So in that bottom right, it hasn't been named because no business should sit there. And if a business is sitting there, and I have had businesses that do, then it needs to move out of there. Either the value of the product needs to go up, or the service, the service that has to be part of signing up to get it has to be much easier and be self-service. So some examples of some places you might know. For instance, we start at the top left. We've got things like Stripe, Amazon Web Services, and MailChimp. Now, Stripe is quite a high value per account. So over the lifetime of a Stripe credit card processing account as an e-commerce person, you'll be getting quite a lot of, they'll be getting quite a lot of money out of you. But signing up for Stripe is pretty self-serve. There's not a lot of support there until you really need it. But the sign-up process doesn't need somebody to sit beside you to sign you up. You don't have to walk into a bank in order to get yourself an FPOS machine or a card reader. It's a very simple process, and it's all automated. Amazon's Web Services is the biggest web host in the world, and they host probably most of the websites in the world these days. But it's a completely self-serve automated service, but it is quite high value. So they've managed to find a way to do something that doesn't require a lot of service or staff, but is powering billions of dollars worth of commerce. MailChimp, similarly, can get quite expensive, but not super expensive. So it's very close to the self-serve complex, the horizontal line. But it's also incredibly self-serve. There's not a lot of service required. Again, very self-serve. As we go down the bottom left, we're looking at a couple of other products. The one that stands out for me is Xero. Xero is fairly low value per account. Now, we might think that $50 a month is quite high as small businesses, but in the bigger picture of how much it costs to run that for the actual service called Xero, to them, that $50 isn't a great deal of money. But the lifetime value can be quite strong, and it's fairly self-serve. Very rarely do you need to get on the phone to talk to someone at Xero to help you through something. They've made it so that most of the service is done through your bookkeeper or through your accountant. So you don't really need to turn to them to do that. So they've got a low value, but it's also low service. So therefore it's not sitting in that danger zone where it's low value, but also high maintenance. Then over on the top right, you've got what we call the enterprise tools, your paid versions of HubSpot, paid versions of Marketo and Salesforce, which are big software packages designed for organizations that are much bigger than yours or mine. And they have complicated onboarding. You have to go through training to be onboarded. You have to go through a lot of sign-up processes. Quite often with things like HubSpot, you have to go through third-party sellers. It can be a little confusing. Salesforce is particularly hard to get you on. But the actual amount that those things cost is quite high. So the payoff is that if a customer goes through that complicated sales process of qualification through to training, then they're likely to pay the money that it's going to cost them to run that particular software. Remembering, of course, you do not want to be in that danger zone on the bottom right, where it's no value really, but a highly complicated, high maintenance process to get someone onboarded. Ultimately, you want to live in this top right, but not all of us are going to be corporate sized people or to want to deal with corporates. We want to deal with other small businesses and consumers. We're mostly going to sit over on the left, and it will depend on how expensive our product is and how much it costs us to produce that product, whether we sit above or below that line. So some considerations, I've spent a bit of time on that one, is that, look, sometimes that sales is hard. That sales is going to be hard to reach because not everyone's going to be reached the same way. And some segments and some kinds of businesses and consumers are very, very hard to reach. So for instance, if you were someone who was doing blogging and you were trying to reach people through what they call content marketing, it'd be very difficult to reach dentists, as it's much easier to reach marketers. Marketers are people who read blogs all the time. Dentists tend to not read blogs. So you've got to consider how to reach each individual kind of target customer that you want to reach. You'll usually have one core target customer, and you'll probably already start to get a picture of where they live, what they do, what their interests are, and the kind of money they've got available to spend with you. Then you've got to also consider what are called contract cycles. If you're dealing in that enterprise space, if you want to sell to bigger companies, then you've got to understand that they work in cycles of at least 12 months. They don't like to buy things on a monthly basis or on a very short-term basis. They prefer to do things in 12-month cycles, financial years. So you may need to go through a tender process. It's a lot harder to secure that client. In other words, the sales process sits very much in that top right, where it was quite high maintenance for you to get the sale, but the sale you get is very high value. And then you also want to look at the difference between whether something is high value and high cost, or high value and low cost. If something is high value and also high cost, then you may be making $5,000 per sale, but if it's costing you $4,500 to make that sale, you're only making $500. But if you're doing something at $5,000 for the sale and it's only costing you $50 to reach that and secure that client, then you're making a lot more money. You need to factor in how much it's going to cost you to make your product, do your service, train yourself to be an expert in your service, how to reach that customer, that unicorn that's going to buy what you do, and convert them and onboard them to be your customer. So ideally, you want to be in the high value, low cost, but not everyone can be there. Sometimes it will be high value and high cost. The whole idea is then to work on either a lot of volume of clients coming in, or you've got to find a way of reducing those costs down so that you can make a little bit more out of every client you've got on board. Now we look at the self-serve versus the high touch. So this is the bit where you go super high maintenance when it comes to someone signing up, or whether it's something completely automated and self-serve, and where you may need to change it, come over from being self-serve and low maintenance to being more high touch and high maintenance. John Barrows is an excellent sales trainer who says you can only automate and educate people so much before they want to talk to someone. Oh my goodness, how many times have you had to call Telstra when you've come up against this? They will give you all manner of automated responses. In fact, I tried to call Medicare the other day to get my new Medicare card, and I had to go through 5 different automated descriptions of what I didn't have a problem with to get to speak to someone who could help me with the problem I actually had. It was a frustrating experience, and I can totally sympathize and empathize with that statement. So where automated sales processes and low maintenance sales processes work that don't require you to be in there too much is where you're working in that low value and low service quadrants. So over on the left top and bottom, but not too far at the top. As it gets very, very high value, there's an expectation that people are going to have that they're going to want to speak to a person or deal with someone a bit more real time. In the enterprise space, you're very rarely going to get an enterprise that's going to spend, $10,000 or more with you that doesn't want to speak to someone at some stage to see if it's legit. They're not going to sit there with their corporate Amex and just go, yep, throw away $10,000 on this complete unknown person. So what you need to do is work out what the average contract or average sale value is to you. So the sale to you could be a $100 dress. It could be a $25 bottle of essential oil. It could be a scented soap. It could be a service contract that you take on that could get you up to $10,000 worth of stuff a year. If you're selling something for $1,000 a month, that's $12,000 a year. So your average contract isn't that $1,000 a month, it's $12,000 over a year. So you can afford to automate when something is under that $1,000 mark a year. If you're only making $1,000 on them, and your margin is probably going to be within that 20 to 30% range, where you're really making probably about $300 out of that 1,000, then you need to automate as much as you can. You need to take the human out of it a little bit, using chatbots, using email automation, using processes on a smart website that do a lot of the sign up for you. You don't want to be caught on the phone and on Zoom calls every day for something that's only going to make you $300 for that year. In the middle area, you got that sort of gray area where it's $1,000 to $5,000, where you're just going, well, I'm sort of starting to get a little bit too big to automate everything, and my people are starting to want to talk to me a bit more. And then you get that $5,000 year plus a year where people are going to want to expect to talk to you. When you're getting that 10,000 up, it's absolutely vital that you should be talking to someone. There should be someone you can talk to who can help you out with that, whatever that problem is that they may have to, that you may have. So think about it from your client's point of view. If they're going to spend $1,000 a year or less with you, then the expectation they speak to someone is probably quite low. There's a very good reason why companies like Facebook have business sales reps. So for instance, I spend well over $150,000 a year, I think, on Facebook ads for myself. For my clients, that could go up to $500,000 a year. So with that in mind, I get a sales rep who I can speak to at Facebook whenever I need to speak to them because I've got the money to do it. For the clients to spend $1 million up, they have got actually a dedicated Facebook rep who's just there to be their team member at Facebook. You're not going to get that when you're spending a $10 boost here and there. So it's not, when you look at it like this from your perspective and you go, well, I don't want to spend so much of my time talking to people who spend less than $1,000 a year with me, then you'll understand why big companies also think that way. If they're spending more than that $10,000 a year, and in my case, over $100,000 a year, then you start to get a little bit more of an access to people who can help you. They'll also be helping other people. They won't be dedicated just to you, but you will get a helper who you can turn to when you've got a few problems going along. We're going to look at now your clear sales tasks, those things you cannot ignore to get that sale across the line. And this comes down to whether you want to be an inbound person or an outbound person. Different kinds of people are very different with their approach to sales. So inbound means having some sort of process in place that helps you to answer the calls, answer the queries, answer the questions, do quotes, and talk about pricing with people. You've got to have something like a rate card that sits at your desk or something you've got in your pocket, which you know exactly off the top of your head that you can quote that and go through the process of talking to a customer who's come in through any manner of area. They could be a message in Facebook Messenger. They could be a phone call from your website. They could be an email sent from a form on your website. But then there's the outbound, which is the one that makes a lot of people squirm because we think of telemarketing. We think of, cold calling. And that's also having a process in place to reach out to potential customers, whether they're cold or maybe they're warm. Maybe there's someone who is expecting a call from you or wants a call from you. Not all calling outbound is cold and telemarketing-ish. So if we look at the inbound sales skills you need to have if you want to be an inbound kind of business, you want people to be able to call you, you need to learn how to advertise, because advertising is the thing that's going to get you the most amount of stuff coming through the door every time. You'll need to know how to network, because the second biggest form of ongoing business is coming from those relationships you build. Initially, most of your sales when you start out are going to probably come from that networking, people through family, friends, and associates and colleagues. That's what's going to drive your sales initially, but longer term, it's going to be the advertising that does that. So you're also going to have the gift of the gab, but more importantly, like my grandma used to say, we were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The ability to be able to listen to a client, to know exactly what it is that they're after and what they need, rather than just having a rate card that you want to quote off to them. So that's a really interesting set of skills you need to have. But then you also need to be comfortable getting your calls or your leads coming from all kinds of sources. So they could be coming in, like we said, from Facebook Messenger, from an Instagram direct message, from a phone call, from a text message, from an email, from a chat on your website. If you've got live chat on there, you need to be comfortable taking leads from all kinds of sources. Locking out any particular kind of source is very you-centric, not customer-centric. I had to learn that the hard way. I didn't like to answer calls and I don't like to make calls. I had to learn how to do both. And it's interrupting my day, yes, but ultimately, by not answering that call, I'm cutting off my pipeline. Even if it's a tire kicker, that tire kicker, if they had a good experience, may pass on that good experience to other people who may not be tire kickers. Then we go to the outbound sales skills you're going to need. You have to have no fear of the phone. Now, I've always had a fear of the phone. I've never liked them. I don't like being on them for long. I prefer to text message with my mother. She hates that I do that, but she loves it when I call. So I've learned over the years that I have to get over my fear of the phone if I'm going to call people who have previously expressed some kind of interest in what I'm doing, or if I've got something literally that I need to share with them that isn't necessarily a sale, but could be, hey, I've got an expo coming up. Do you want to be in it? You've got to have the ability to write. You're going to send out a lot of emails as an outbound person. Even as an inbound person, you're going to reply to a lot of emails. So you need to learn how to write as a business owner, not just as an individual human. Then you'll need to participate in things like, online and real world networks and forums. Now, quite often selling your wares comes down to be, in a lot of small businesses' case, being on local buy, sell and swap groups on Facebook. They may not be a fun place to be. They may be sometimes really frustrating places to be. But if you're first starting out and trying to build a first customer base, they can be an ideal place to really grow out your business and get yourself known to a market that doesn't know you yet. So I do thoroughly recommend that if you're getting started and you want to see a way that's really cheap to advertise yourself, learn how to participate in online forums like Facebook's buy, sell and swap groups and local business groups, because it will do you a lot of good. And then it helps you also when you're having an outbound encounter with a potential client, that you have a very, very simple message, an easy to recall sales message and easy to recall pricing. Having a very simple setup of what your pricing and products are and what your actual message is for your business is going to make it so simple for you to make that call. If you have a natural fear of the phone like I do, you wouldn't think I'd be quite an introvert, but I really am. I don't really like being too public. I don't really like making phone calls. I'm a bit of a hermit sometimes, but I've had to grow out of that in order to grow businesses. I've had to grow out of that in order to fulfill my roles for the various businesses that I do work for. And I've only been able to do that by having a really simple message about who I am, what I do, who my ideal customer is, and how they can become my customer. And also the ability to be able to quote prices straight off the cuff, rather than having to go, oh, let me go away for 3 days and think about that. Meanwhile, my competitors who they just called have now come and undercut me without me even knowing that I was being undercut in the first place. So if you're looking at the outbound, the inbound, you're going to be reliant on advertising a lot more. You're going to have to do a lot of spending money on advertising, which means it costs more to do inbound. It's also less time consuming because you're paying for all that to happen. You're not having to do the prospecting. You're not having to work out all, going to all the networking meetings. You've got stuff coming into you because you paid someone else to promote you. It is better for those introverts like you and maybe me, well, definitely me, maybe you, who may not like doing the outbound call stuff. But if you are thinking, I'm not afraid to make calls, I'm not afraid to promote who I am, great. Well, then it's going to be heavily reliant on your personality, because people generally will buy from people they like or trust or have some kind of rapport with, particularly if it's something you're going to spend a lot of money on, or if it's a particular service or product that's not a necessity, but it's something that just kind of makes their life better. It does cost less to do the outbound because it's literally emails and phone calls, but it is far more time consuming. The managing director here at Treaty Business Consulting, who I work with, is a master at outbound calling. She has no qualms in it at all. She doesn't care what people think of her because she knows that it's all about her business and growing it. She is very much an extrovert and very, very good at what she does. She doesn't like relying on the inbound. She prefers to have control over her sales pipeline. Me, I like to sort of outsource that control to someone else. So we make quite a good team. We sort of work off each other. Now we define who your customer profile is. We're going to look at who the actual person is you want to sell. My definition of the ideal customer comes from an ideal customer profile, which addresses the problem with trying to target everyone. After all, when you try to appeal to everyone, you're not going to appeal to anyone. It's like the try to please all and you'll please one is an old. It's from an old fairy tale. I feel like an old tale, like from a let's say Mills and Boom. I'm thinking Grimm and Anderson, Tales of Grimm and Anderson, one of those fables. If you try to please everyone, you will please nobody. So when you're looking at target marketing or looking for who your target is, you don't want to be too vague, because the problems with being a little bit too vague and a little bit too broad with who you're targeting by saying, well, I target everyone. Everyone who's got the ability to buy stuff, I'm targeting them. That's too vague. It's too expensive to target and too ineffective. You'll try to do something that appeals to everybody and you will appeal to absolutely nobody. Another vague one could be all women everywhere. Like women where? Women in Cambodia, women in Canada, women in Germany, women in Sri Lanka. That's just it's too broad. You cannot appeal to all women because, as you would know, not all women are the same. Not all men are the same. Not all people over 10 years old are the same. Then targeting the entire population of a city or a town is also pretty ineffective, because unless it is something which is a major event in that town, like the annual royal show or the county show or the regional show or the town show, that kind of thing that involves a great big proportion of a regional population, then you're really sort of pumping something out to people who don't care. And you're paying for every one of those other sets of eyes that aren't interested in what you're doing. But if you become too clear, too niche, you're looking for someone who, you know, is into German board games, reads Nietzsche, and watches amateur Croatian boxing. Way too niche. You need to come out a little bit more than that. So if you get too clear, you end up narrowing it down to the one male in the world sitting in a living room or his mother's basement in the Midwest of America who happens to like German board games, reads Nietzsche, and watches amateur Croatian boxing. So a good ideal customer profile lets you easily recognize a customer as they walk in the door, as they come into your pipeline, as they send an email to you. You'll be able to spot a good prospective customer really quickly if you have a good ideal customer profile. A simple profile is something which you can easily recite back to somebody else. You can remember it easily, you can recite it back easily. Who is your ideal customer? You can say, my ideal customer is a small business that's struggling and stressed out and unable to get everything done that they need to get done. That is a really solid ideal customer profile that's simple and easy to remember, and it happens to be my one. Systematic. You should be able to identify those people through some kind of system. So whether it's going through a database and looking at the database and going them, not them, not them, not all that one there. Or you can identify it in things like a digital advertising platform, like Facebook ads, where you can target people based on their interests and their demographics as well. So examples of some really good ideal customer profiles will be engaged online shoppers who use Facebook and are women over 35 years old. And I would add then in Sydney. So you're getting really, really specific about the kind of person that you want to reach. You can look at sports fans who are fans of the Brisbane Lions who live outside of Brisbane, but are Apple iPhone users. That is a completely valid and very specific, but not too specific, kind of profile you might have for who your customer is. Or they could be homeowners, people who own their own homes, are Bunnings shoppers, and who have children under 13 years old. I've based all those off things you can actually target in the Facebook ads platform. You can also target those largely in the LinkedIn platform, although probably not the children under 13 years old bit, but you can target a lot of those interests in there as well. The idea is to get something that's broad enough to get enough people in, but narrow enough to start to filter out the people that don't really matter, the tire kickers and the people who can't afford what you can do. Next, you need to be more than just a doer of the work. You need to be a bit of a consultant and an advisor in the area that you work in. Mark Roberge, who is from Harvard Business School, says we need to do a better job when we engage with someone to engage with them in their context, not just with our context, with what we want to do and what we want to achieve. We need to step into their world. That is what empathy is all about. So how do you be an advisor and not just a performer of a task in a business? Well, you give advice. Offer free advice, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether you blog, whether you take phone calls, people ask you if you're running a fishing and tackle shop and you're able to direct people to what the right kind of lure is for the right kind of fishing, and they walk out without buying that, you can almost guarantee that someday they're going to come back in, or they will have told someone that the guys at that tackle shop down the road, they were awesome. They told me exactly where to fish and what to use. Didn't need to buy anything from them. They didn't seem to mind. They just helped me out with something I needed help with. By giving advice, you don't just become a nice person. You become a helpful person, and you become the authority in town with what you do. You become the expert. You become the person who knows what to do when it comes to your area of expertise. Learn a bit of empathy. That's come up twice so far. It's not about you, it's about them. So you need to learn to understand the customer's world. You understand your world, that's great. But you also need to understand the world they live in, the problem they have, the issues that they are trying to solve. When you want to become an advisor and a consultant, not just a doer, then the marketing you're doing is all about them as well. It's marketing that appeals to the problem they're going through, not to the solution you provide. So whilst you want to list your features and benefits of this amazing program or this amazing product that you've got, they're more interested in, do you solve my problem? Do you make me feel better? Do you make my life work? Do you take away my headache? Do you get my washing done for me? And the big one here is to follow up as well. If you're going to step into that world of consulting, giving advice and all that, you need to be able to do follow-up. You can give that initial bit of advice and say, hey, do you mind if I follow up with you in a couple of weeks and see how you went with that fishing rod? Or do you mind if I send you an email in a couple of weeks so I can follow up to see how you went with that DIY job? Hey, do you mind if I give you a call in a couple of weeks just to see how you went with that task you want? Because I might have a few more ideas to give you. That kind of follow-up is going to help you grow your business way beyond just that initial conversation you have with someone, all because you care about what you do, but you also care about the people that you're dealing with. That's empathy. I can't stress how strongly how empathy really rocks your business world. It really makes a big difference to how people relate to you because you're relating to them within their context. Now we're going to move up market. We're going to try and get more. We're going to deliberately raise our rates. When you first start out, you might start up as the cheaper option in town. Most new businesses will start this way. They'll start with competing by offering a lower price point so that they can attract new customers who will transfer over from other providers of what you do or other stores that sell what you sell. Then as time goes by, you become a bit more established and you start adding on new little features and benefits and services so that you can have, you know, I once upon a time just sold scented candles, and now I'm selling wax melts as well. So as you get those more add-ons, then you can raise your rates. Once your add-ons are becoming a product of their own, so if you're selling 3 or 4 things that are all making money, then that initial thing you bring people in for, the scented candle or the life coaching or the business consultation, then you can start to have your price of entry go up. You're now becoming a provider of multiple things and you're becoming an expert in your field and you're established. The rate for some of the payers that come into your business can be a bit higher now. It doesn't have to be as low as it was. An example is Jetstar. Jetstar, we all know it. We all have probably had issues with it at some point. I know I have. They have a basic offering called the starter fare where you can't choose your seat. You can only bring carry-on luggage. That's great for a short little overnighter, not that great for going away for a week. And I've been told that if you're a woman, it's really not very helpful because there's not a lot you can carry in your bag to get you through even one night with 7 kilos in the overhead locker. But they do have their add-ons. You can add on the ability to cancel and not lose your money. You can add on seat selection if you need a bit more room or you like to sit in the up front so you get to be first off. You can offer food and drink as an add-on. They've got checked baggage. So if you want to add 20, 30 kilos of checked baggage, you can add those things on. And then as you add each of those things on, it becomes more expensive. In fact, they don't become a very low fare airline after all that. They can be as much as Qantas and Virgin just by adding those add-ons. So what they've done is they've gone, well, yes, you can enter our world as a starter fare. You don't get much. It's very, very low end. And that's what most people go with. Or you can come in as a starter plus where you get a little bit more. You might be able to select a seat or starter max where you get a $15 worth of food and drink, plus you get your seat selection and you get some checked baggage as well. Or you go fully flex and it means you can change your flight at last notice, not lose your money and transfer to another flight at any time you like. So they have managed to have multiple price points, but they basically have this low entry level, but you can come in at now 4 different entry levels. You can come in as a starter plus, a starter max, or a flex. And in fact, if you go via them on international, you can also, in many cases, go as a business class traveler. So they've now got multiple points of access, some that cost a lot more than the original. So they get to present themselves as a cheaper option, but they also get to offer you the full service option as well. Very smart move from them. And this is probably the most successful airline model today in the world, is where you don't just offer that cheap option, you offer all the bells and whistles as well. It's just going to cost you more to do it. Now we're going to look at experimenting before you make changes. If you want to add new ideas to your business, businesses are, look, New ideas in business are great because they give you new ways to potentially make revenue, to make more money. But they also take the focus away from what your business is trying to do to make money now. So how do you run an experiment? You start off with it, and if you remember this from year 7 and 8 science, maybe you start off with a hypothesis. You go in and say, I've got this idea and I expect the outcome to be this. Then you design a way of testing that. So what is the process that you're going to test? What is the timeline? When's it got to be completed by? And how do you measure whether it's successful or a failure? Then you run the experiment for that agreed amount of time that you set for that timeline, and you see what the result is. If you get a good result or a bad result, then you analyze that result to see if it was a failure or a success, or whether it's something which you can throw out, or whether it's something you can go, actually, you know what? There might be some extra money in that for me. Those sort of experiments can be like adding a new product, opening later, working on weekends, things as simple as that, where you can go, I really need to test this out properly for a good month or two before I can make a decision of whether I'm taking this on as a full-time part of my business. Your experiment could be working on the side. If you've got a job and you want to do a side gig, that could be part of your experiment as well. And then your channel partners. This is a fun area because this is working with other people. Channel partners are really great because when you're ready to get bigger in your business, or you already have clients and you've got a track record, channel partners are a great way to suck in more people that you normally wouldn't get any of. Sucking in sounds like a terrible way of getting there. Attracting people to your business that you normally not be able to reach, but your channel partners do reach. Channel partners can also be a bit of a problem because when you're starting off, you don't have a lot of clients, or you don't have a proven track record, then it's very hard to attract people who want to sell your product for you. So the kind of channel partner types we're looking at here are people who get paid a commission or a fee or a percentage based upon what they're bringing in sales. These can be things like lead generation. Lead generation is a really good example of this, where you pay people to give you a lead that leads to maybe a sale or maybe not. They get paid either way. Team-based or pod-based channel partners are where two or more businesses that are in sort of the same kind of vicinity, but they're not necessarily doing the same thing, work together to bid for bigger jobs. So for instance, the example would be when the Curtis Island processing plant was built off Gladstone in Queensland. It was set up to be they wanted to do buy local. They wanted to get a lot of local suppliers and local contractors. For the steelworks there, though, the individual local steel suppliers couldn't do it as one unit, but when they came together, they were able to easily be able to supply that amount of steel. So by joining together with others, they formed a pod and were able to actually outbid a Chinese supplier who was cheaper because of that buy local mentality that the company went in there with. Likewise, it could be where a website designer joins up with a graphic designer, joins up with an SEO expert, and joins up with a marketing specialist to offer complete end-to-end marketing strategy and services, where each of them wouldn't be able to do that on their own, but they can do an individual part of that together. So that can be really good because you don't just get those big projects, people actually refer you. We work with a copywriter, for instance, who's constantly referring work to us in the digital marketing space. And she works with a web developer who she sends a lot of work to as well. Reseller is another way, another channel you can go through. They buy your service or product at a reduced rate based on the amount of volume they're expected to bring in. And then they sell it on at either your normal rate, so they get a little cut of it, or they sell it at an even higher rate. An example of this would be something like Infusionsoft or Keep, which is a customer relationship management tool where you buy the right to be a reseller, and then you get a very reduced cost to what Infusionsoft would sell it for themselves. So you can pretty much charge whatever you like depending upon the service you want to offer, to set it up, to manage it, to run it, to help them out, to be their support analyst, all that sort of stuff. So when do you use these channel managers? Commissions and lead generation you would want to be using when you've got something that can be sold at a very high volume, and it's also a high amount of money to be made for each sale. For teams and pods, when you do some of the things, but not all of the things that a customer needs, that's when you might want to team up with other people. Like the example I gave, someone does website designing, someone does social media. They don't want to do all of it. They just want to do part of it. So they team up with each other so they can cover both of those needs. In resellers, it's where you've got something that's very much in demand now, and you don't have the resources yourself to go out and sell it for yourself. It might be your product, but you don't have the resources to get out there and sell it. So you have to go and try and get other people to sell it because you don't have the time nor the money to go to market with this yourself. Let's have a quick recap. A sales strategy is an approach to keeping a pipeline of work coming into your business. Don't be too broad or too tight when you're targeting your ideal customer. You can also automate some stuff, but eventually you will need to talk to someone when that gets a little bit too valuable or when you need to complicate the sales process a bit. Be able to give free advice to potential customers where you can, not just seek a sale. Decide whether you're an inbound salesperson or an outbound salesperson, or maybe a combo of both of those things, a little bit of each. Consider moving up market with add-ons because they can be a good way to grow your sales without having necessarily to build out a whole other business. Make sure you do an experiment before you add something new, and don't add that something new to your business until you run a successful experiment, maybe even 2 or 3 times to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And then consider using your channel partners once you're really motoring along and you've got yourself a good lot of momentum. So thank you for joining me this afternoon. I hope you really got some value out of that and you've got some ideas. You can see that all again at the YouTube channel of Business Station. Just go to youtube.com, search for Business Station. They'll have that up usually within 2 days, but I noticed that last night's one I did was actually up there today. So please go along there, see any of those previous ones. I've got some other things I'm doing next week, doing a course on how to write an ebook and where to use it on Monday. Wednesday, I'm doing how to find an extra source of income. Thursday, we're looking about telling your business's story through Instagram. That's an official training thing from my friends at Facebook and Instagram Australia. And then on Friday, we're going to be looking at how to delegate and outsource. Thank you again. Have a fantastic night. Thank you for your questions. And I hope to see you soon at another one of my presentations as we learn more about how to get your business through this C19 period, not just surviving, but thriving as well. Thank you and good night.